In 1987, the 13 most powerful football teams in Brazil broke away from the Brazilian Footballing Confederation and made their own league. They represented 95% of all football fans in Brazil, but their alliance only lasted for a single season. In 2003, Russian billionaire oligarch Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea Football Club. Abramovich had more than deep pockets, he had deep connections. It was him that recommended that Vladimir Putin succeed Boris Yeltsin as the leader of Russia, and him again that suggested Medvedev replace Putin during his brief stint away from the top spot. Fresh off a win at the 2003 Super Bowl, the owners of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Glazer family, began looking to invest in European football. Would it even have been possible for them to overlook the most valuable football team in the world under the command of the game's most influential manager? Boasting Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, Ruud van Nistelrooy, and the up-and-coming duo of Wayne Rooney and Cristiano Ronaldo. Who could ever have looked further than Manchester United? Not the Glazers, clearly. In 2008, the same year the world collapsed into its worst ever economic depression, Manchester City were bought by the current Deputy Prime Minister of the United Arab Emirates, and Arsenal went to the owner of the Los Angeles Rams, the Denver Nuggets, Colorado Avalanche, Colorado Rapids, and Walmart. In 2010, Liverpool was sold to the owner of the Boston Red Sox, and Leicester City was bought by a billionaire from Thailand. When Leicester won the 2015-16 Premier League title, it was touted as an underdog story, but even the Rocky of the Premier League was owned by a foreign billionaire. The highest transfer fee of 2003 was paid for David Beckham as he moved from Manchester United to Real Madrid. He went for £25 million. When Paris Saint-Germain bought Neymar just 14 years later, it was for €222 million. Just in case you didn't notice, there was a global pandemic that hit in 2020, and it kind of destroyed the lives and economic prospects of everyone who wasn't Jeff Bezos. But on the 19th of April 2021, something quite incredible happened to the footballing world. While the Brazilian breakaway lasted an entire season, this European one didn't make it to 48 hours. When we started recording this, the cracks in the foundations had began to show, and by the time we finished, the corporate house of cards had collapsed. Welcome back to Who Watches the World Cup, the podcast where we talk about the intersection of football and politics. Today, we're breaking down the European Super League. So, with me today to discuss the European Super League is Awful Commentary founder and lifelong Manchester United fan, Stephen Mears. Steve, it has been so long since you were featured on something from Awful Commentary. It is I don't know, it's an honour to have you back.
It's like coming to the high school reunion after 15 years of being out of town.
Yeah, and that means you come back in and everyone like me is still doing the same shit they've always done, and you're coming in like, oh, I just work for Rockstar. It's like, oh my god, honestly, people, he's too busy leading his dream life to make content anymore. And Awful Commentary was always your idea.
I know it. I had to... Anyway, we're here to talk about football, Dominic.
This is true.
Something to do with a Super League.
Yes, well, I've brought you in to talk about this because when the Super League was announced, and we should say, as we started recording, Manchester City have just withdrawn. Chelsea are expected to follow. There's rumours going around, this Super League is crumbling before it even started. The Brazilian one lasted a season. This one seems to have lasted a day. But when it was first announced, I was watching different pundits being like, this is a disgrace. It's an abomination. What were they thinking? And I was like, well, this kind of makes sense if you're a capitalist. And then I messaged you about it, and you were like, this is fucking awful. And I was like, okay, Steve, what is this Super League? Is there a history to it? What does it all mean?
So the Super League is a, well, proposed new European footballing competition, spearheaded, it seems, well, no, spearheaded by the president of Real Madrid, who I forget his first name, but is someone Perez, and the owners of Manchester United, the Glazer family. They seem to be the top two uh, parties that are driving this forward. But what it will be is a new competition, which would be 20 teams uh, from Europe battling it out across a season to then try and figure out who is the best in Europe. So it's kind of a, well, replacement to the existing Champions League, but it was initially announced as like a supplementary competition to the existing European Champions League, but with a few key differences that there are 12 founding teams at the moment that would be expanded to 15. And these founding teams would have a lifelong membership to this league. And then there would be 5 additional places that would be filled by other teams from within European footballing leagues. The details of how those 5 would be chosen, I don't think was ever ever got to the stage of actually being detailed. And the teams involved, there were 6 teams from England: Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham Hotspurs, and Chelsea. Then there were 3 teams from Spain: Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Atletico Madrid, and 3 teams from Italy: Juventus, AC Milan, and Inter Milan. They were the 12 initial founding teams. Then they were hoping to get on board an additional 3 teams to make 15. Then there would be these 5 places up for grabs. And it would kind of work a bit like what I would say the Super Bowl. It would be split into 2 leagues or conferences of 10 teams. The top 3 teams from each league would go through to a knockout stage. The teams that finished 4th and 5th in each league would play in a playoff, and then the winner of that playoff would enter. So you would get 4 teams into a knockout tournament, which would be over 2 legs, and then you'd have a single leg final to declare the winner of this new European Super League. And that's the basic format that they announced.
Right. So just looking at the teams themselves, like and who's running this organization. You've got, as you say, is it Florentino Perez, the president of Real Madrid? I think.
I think you are right, yes.
Yeah, so he was like the chairman of this overall thing. He had a very controversial statement today saying, we had to do this because young people don't watch football anymore. And that's something I want to kind of come on to a little bit later. But he's the president of the whole thing. Then the chairman of Juventus, who is an Italian, is Andrea Agnelli. He's one of the vice chairmen. Joel Glazer of United, he's a co-chairman. John Henry from Liverpool, he's another American. Stan Kroenke, the owner of Arsenal, another American. One of the first things that was said about this, and you brought it up when you said about the Super Bowl, is this is an Americanization of our sport. And it's worth saying, if we're going to talk about the Super Bowl, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, owned by the Glazers, did just win the Super Bowl earlier in the year. So clearly, the Glazers feel like they are doing something right. And this is the next step for them to take, right? But, like, is this a new idea, the Super League? Like, they announced it fucking out of nowhere, basically, yesterday, after reassuring like UEFA for like a week, oh no, we're not going to announce it, bam, they announce it, and everyone shits themselves. Where does this idea come from? Like, is there any history to it, and why is it even different to the Champions League at all? Like, why bother?
So I think this idea of a Super League has kind of been floated around or rumoured for quite a number of years now. There's in the last day or so, there have been quotes from Jurgen Klopp from 2019 stating that he doesn't like the idea of a Super League. There was quotes going around from when Louis van Gaal was manager of Manchester United commenting on a Super League. So rumblings of a European Super League or some sort of changing of the format of the Champions League have kind of been spoken about for quite a while. And even yesterday or the day after all the news started breaking about the announcement of this Super League, it was the day before that UEFA announced planned reforms to the existing Champions League. So I think the, let's say, quote, biggest clubs in Europe have been kind of gunning for a change in the Champions League for quite a while now, in the hopes to kind of get a more permanent place within the competition, or to help cement their place in the top competition for quite a while. So I guess you could say, in a way, this has kind of been a long time coming, but then at the same time, it's been a very low rumble, and then all of a sudden, a few days ago, it erupted like a volcano and it caught everybody by surprise, that nobody realised that this was actually going to happen so fast. There was no real concrete rumours about, there's talks that this clubs might be doing this. It kind of came out of nowhere in a way, but there is some history to the idea of trying to make some revisions to the Champions League format.
Looking at what we were saying about the Americanization of it as well, the money all seemed to come from J.P. Morgan. Obviously, basically the causes of the financial crisis in 2008 are back, baby, and they're back to ruin more of the stuff for the working class. But that seems to be a big reason for why people are so upset about this, right? Is that football, at least in this country, and I think throughout Europe, is historically a sport of the working class. And people seem to be angry because it's been taken away from working class fans who were just like, you'd spend your week in the fucking coal mine exhausting yourself for the labour just to get through the week. Then you go to the pub, and on Saturday, thank God, you can go and watch the football, at least. And you go with your friends, you go with your colleagues, you go with your community. And as the Premier League itself as an institution has grown, it's become more and more difficult, especially under these billionaire owners, where it's like a ticket to go and watch an Arsenal game is like £100, £125 for like a single ticket or something. Like, it's unbelievably expensive to go and watch a Premier League football team now at this point. But people still seem to be harking back to the working class roots of football now, which, they've been silent about that while billionaires were buying their clubs, and now the billionaires are like, actually, we're billionaires and we're going to do billionaire shit. People are like, oh, the working class. It's like, you didn't care about the working class when they were buying Neymar, right? You didn't care when they sold, David Beckham for £25 million. You were like, oh my God, £25 million, the things we can do with that. You were the person I know who was the most angry about this, right? So, you so far in the podcast, you have been very contained. I want you to hulk out, unleash everything you sent to me in those voice messages yesterday. I can't believe they're doing this stuff. I can't believe it. I'm so angry, you said. Tell me why. Why did this drive you up the wall?
I'll try and draw on my inner rage from yesterday.
It starts with the Glazers, right? Because you, for a long time, have been like, oh, goddamn Glazers, like that. So what is it about them and this that really is, driving Gary Neville angry? Gary Neville has had hot takes.
Yeah, he has. He's been spitting fire or spitting pure
Yes.
facts recently. But yeah, as you were saying, it's I think the what's really pushed a lot of fans over the edge is kind of the overt like elitism that's been perceived of this league, because one of the key differences between this league and the existing Champions League is that these founding teams would not be able to get relegated or removed from this league. And whilst that I'm less familiar with American sports, but I believe that's a more common uh, structure in American sport, whereas particularly in the UK, and I think most football leagues in Europe, they're built on the foundation of promotion and relegation. You do well, you move up. You don't do as well, you move down. So, where a lot of anger has come from this league is the fact that they feel that it's becoming even more of a rich boys club than what it is already, or perhaps they're showing their true colours finally of what they've always been.
One of the things that you said to me was you were like, they don't care about the game anymore, right? This shows they don't care about the game. They only care about money, and they only care about themselves earning more money as the owners of their team, right? But if I'm the owner of a football team and I have just spent all of this money to buy a Premier League football team, like, of course I want to make the most money out of it. Like, everyone understands that's why you buy a football team. It's an investment, right? So what is it like about like the Glazers? Maybe it's their history with the club, or why are fans surprised and angry that these billionaires want to make money? They're billionaires. It's what they do, right?
Yeah, and I think as we touched on before, part of it might be the perceived Americanization of the sport, and I think it kind of plays more on the fans' uh, heartstrings of not only have these American owners in the case of is it Stan Kroenke at Arsenal and FSG at Liverpool and the Glazers at Man United, not only have they come in and bought these giant English clubs and managed them in a so-so way, or seemed to take little interest in the football side of things, and as you said, very much just bought them as businesses. It still kind of remained a bit more of a, still felt English or whatever, following the same structure. Whereas perhaps because this seems like it's following more of an American Super Bowl kind of structure, I feel part of it is that they feel that it's another further step there, taking away the football clubs and football from a British institution, a British cultural thing about club heritage and club loyalty and local fans, and as you mentioned before about these socialist working man's clubs that a lot of these clubs were originally built on, whilst they are very far away from that even now, people still feel that bit of connection to the clubs. And this Super League seemed like a very much globalization of these clubs, and it no longer being about the fans from Manchester or the fans from London or the fans from Liverpool. It's about focusing on fans of the future, the global fans. It's almost like it's the brand of Manchester United, the franchise of Manchester United, not the actual soul of Manchester United. And also, a lot of clubs have very storied histories with the Champions League. Um, many clubs in England have won the competition many times. Obviously, Man United, who unfortunately our owners seem to be some of the main people spearheading this idea. The most iconic moments in the club's history, the 99 treble, is synonymous with the Champions League. You have the Busby Babes who died on the way back from a European game. I think it was 58. So there's a lot of history, and the creation of this Super League, whilst it was supposedly advertised as a supplementary competition, the logistics of it make it impossible to be able to work side by side on the Champions League. So it feels like they're turning their back on the history of the club and the competitions that they've been a part of to basically be like, okay, well, we're moving on from you now. Thank you for your service. We're moving into the next phase where we just care about international fans and the global aspect of the sport. And as you think previously said, or as we've touched on, like, football has come a long way since those original roots from the clubs. And you could say that the formation of the Premier League, in '92, contributed to that, and football moving from terrestrial television to Sky TV to satellite TV to cable TV behind a subscription fee or a paywall increased the money in the league. And again, like you said, with the increased foreign investment within the league over the last 15 years, with perhaps starting with Roman Abramovich buying Chelsea, and then Man United being bought, Liverpool being bought, Man City being bought more recently, and Leicester. And there was also rumoured a few years ago, or there seems to be continual rumours of someone wanting to buy Newcastle, other sheikhs being interested in buying Newcastle. Like, as you said, with players like Neymar being sold for 220 million, it's not really a working class man's game anymore. But I still think a lot of fans still see it that way. They still feel like they have that connection to the club. They still feel that they are a part of it. And I think that this announcement with the Super League was kind of the final cutting of the cord that kind of anchored those clubs to that history and kind of retained that original spirit and all of the things that the clubs have gone through to be in the luxurious position that they are now, to be able to consider themselves the best teams or the richest teams in Europe, to be able to go ahead and form this super duper league. So yeah, I think that's why a lot of fans were quite angry, because they feel like it was kind of stealing the soul of their club, or kind of they were hit very hard with the reality of this is the end goal of why these people purchased the clubs in the first place. They've kind of been biding their time, behind the scenes for quite a long time, trying to figure out the best way to monetize these clubs. Because I was speaking to a colleague earlier, and he was saying that, like, historically football clubs haven't been the best investment to make money.
Yeah.
Which is why probably lots of rich billionaires in the UK generally don't buy them or whatever. It's super rich international investors. So now that they have been bought by, American owners, the plan all along is to try and see, okay, how can we turn this into a real business, which kind of has come out as a bit of a sucker punch, or a bit of a reality bite, let's say, to a lot of fans in the last 24 hours, and it's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
Well, I know you were one of those people that definitely was rubbed the wrong way by it. And I think franchise is really the key word there. And when United became essentially the most well-known sports team in the world, right, in like the late 90s, where you have that David Beckham era, the treble, as you were saying, and they become the most profitable sports team in the world for the next 20 years, even though they get mixed results after a certain amount of time. Like the last 10 years for United hasn't exactly been great sports-wise, but money-wise, they've continued to be, one of the most revenue, one of the teams with the highest revenue in sports teams in the world. And what you're saying about the franchise is really interesting, and that kind of marketing side of it. Because yesterday, I said this to you earlier as well, I was watching the BBC News yesterday, and they were talking to fans outside of British stadiums, and they were protesting, and they were like, "This is ridiculous! I can't believe that this has happened." And then they were talking to fans in Italy, and the Italian fans said, "I can't believe this is happening." Then they spoke to a fan in Beijing, and the fan in Beijing said, "This is fantastic. I can't wait, because what I want to do is to stream the best teams against the best teams. Every week I want to see Manchester City versus Barcelona. I want to see Real Madrid against Juventus every week, and this allows me to watch that." And the phrase that was always being used by these owners, or that upset you, I remember, was legacy fans. And you are waving your arms at me in a very excited manner because something has happened. What has happened?
BBC News are just reporting that Executive Vice Chairman of Manchester United, Ed Woodward, is going to apparently step down at the end of 2021. Which is fantastic because he is a snake.
Wow, that you are very excited about that. Who is Ed Woodward? Why is this important? Is he an American? Is he a British guy?
I believe he is a Brit, but as I said, he's the vice chairman of Manchester United, and he's day-to-day basically involved for the day-to-day running of the club. He originally worked for JP Morgan in 2005.
And the funders of this Super League.
Yes, and he was a critical component and ally of the Glazers in being able to come up with the financial package and financial arrangement that allowed the Glazers to purchase Manchester United via leverage buyout in, I can't even remember when it was, back when they did it. So Ed Woodward, it was basically him that allowed...
It was his coup.
Yeah, him that allowed the Glazers to come up with the necessary financial package to be able to convince the Premier League and the owners of Manchester United at the time to be able to purchase them. And he structured the deal and was involved, and kind of ever since he's been considered the Glazers' right-hand man. And I think once, when Ferguson left, and I think David Gill, I believe, was Manchester United's chief executive at the time, when he left with Ferguson, Ed Woodward became the chief executive, which was very controversial because he is a banker, he has no background in football at all. So there has always been loggerheads between him and the fans of him not understanding football or not being a football person, but being in charge of contracts, transfers, basically everything that goes on at Manchester United. And a lot of teams in more recent years have appointed directors of football or technical directors, which was a role that perhaps didn't exist in the past, where you used to have managers like Alex Ferguson and Arsene Wenger who basically had unilateral control over the entire club. They were the top dog. Whereas now in modern football, it's more common that you have a director of football, sporting director, technical director, it gets called lots of different things. That's kind of your high-level overview, and it's his responsibility for kind of creating the vision of the club. This is how we want to play, this is, what type of football we want to do, this is how we're going to run the club, and then the manager is below him as a person that's kind of responsible for, in a way, enacting the vision of the technical director or whatever. So you would hope that the technical director would be involved in hiring a manager. You're picking a manager that you think suits the way that your club wants to play or whatever. And Manchester United have refused to appoint such an individual as its been perceived that Ed Woodward has not wanted to relinquish his overriding control over Manchester United, which has caused a lot of
Friction.
caused a lot of frustration in
Yeah.
in Manchester United fans.
So now he's gone.
He's gone.
Are fans going to celebrate?
Oh yes, Twitter is incredibly excited because he's probably the most hated man in Manchester United, because the Glazers don't get involved in a day-to-day basis.
Right.
So Woodward is the devil at the top of Manchester United, and specifically because it seems like Man United have been heavily involved in the creation of this Super League, his connection with JP Morgan. It's, he again seems like the boogeyman. So it's
that's such an American position to have as well, that technical director. In all the American teams have a general manager, right? And the general manager is your guy who, like you are saying, hires your coach and then hires the team, deals with the contracts, does all of that stuff so that the coach doesn't have to do it. And like Moneyball, for example, the amazing movie Moneyball, like Brad Pitt is the general manager of the Oakland Athletics. In that, like, the main character is the guy who's going around doing the contracts, doing all of this stuff, and it's a very important role in American football, but not just in American sports. I don't mean, but also in the NFL and things like that. But to kind of tie this back into what we were talking about earlier on with like the franchising of the sports, like in American sports, it is. And I think this is what the American owners don't quite understand about the historic institutions in the UK and Europe, is like, if we look at the Utah Jazz, for example, which is the basketball team in America, the Utah Jazz. I don't know how much you know about Utah, but it's famous for like two things. One of them is salt lakes and the other one is Mormonism. And neither one of those involve jazz in any way. And the reason that Utah has the Utah Jazz is because they used to be the New Orleans Jazz, or the Louisiana Jazz, or whatever, where jazz fucking came from. But the franchise moved from Louisiana to Utah, where there is no jazz whatsoever. But they kept the franchise name, which is the Jazz. And that kind of thing happens all the time. The LA Rams, for example, who are owned by one of these big six competitors. The LA Rams moved to St. Louis, and then they were the St. Louis Rams, and then a few years ago they moved back to Los Angeles again, and now they're the LA Rams again. And I think in American sports, the concept of the franchise is far more important than its location. Like, you could just move your franchise wherever you want. Like, none of them have to be in any of the specific places. They move them all the time. But can you imagine saying, well, I own Manchester United and the Red Devils logo is really good, but Manchester City are kind of the dominant Manchester team now. So actually, we're going to move to Paris, and we're going to be Paris United, and we're going to take all of the staff and all the players, and we're just going to move to another city. It couldn't work in football. And that kind of globalization, brand recognition, like the NBA, in going back to the Jazz and to basketball and stuff in general, the NBA has already made that leap that the Super League wants to make to globalizing its fan base, right? The globalize, like, as we know, having lived in China, China is the NBA, or rather, the NBA is its Chinese fans. Like that's where their money comes from. And I think it actually was the general manager of the Houston Rockets that a few years ago said, "Oh, we should stand with Hong Kong about this. What's going on in Hong Kong?" And the NBA was shut down in China, and the NBA had to say, "Now, don't you say anything more. Don't you say anything about what's going on," because they had taken that globalized step. And that is, making that leap to profits comes with costs. And maybe that's the lesson that these guys are learning now, right? If you want to take that big global step, you're going to suffer for it. And in this case, you don't suffer from the effects of dealing with another country. You suffer for the effects of dealing with your own country because they don't understand, maybe.
Yeah, and that's another criticism that's long been levied at least more familiar with the United side of things, but another thing that's always been levied at the ownership, the Glazers at United, is that they don't understand the club or football, or they're not interested in doing so. There was again another quote from, I think it was Joel Glazer from several years ago, saying something along the lines of, "Oh, it took me 2 years to try and understand the offside rule, and I'm still not sure I understand it." And it's that kind of distance or disassociation that these owners are perceived to have, that a lot of fans struggle with. And another point that I heard a lot of fans talking about that was a concern was this kind of franchise concept of moving matches outside of Manchester, basically. Like if you're playing Barcelona or Real Madrid or Juventus every week, where are these matches going to be played, or are these away matches? They're all going to be, in different countries. And admittedly, the Champions League is that, but
But that's a special occasion,
yes,
right?
it's not as frequent. But also the concern was that would escalate further. That are you then going to get Manchester United versus Barcelona in Utah, or are you going to get Manchester United versus Juventus in Dubai, or are you going to get, Chelsea versus Manchester United in the Super League being held in Hong Kong or something, and how are fans, the local fans, supposed to be able to afford and attend these matches that are all over the world? Because the fans want to attend, but obviously the owners don't care whether they can attend or not, because that's not the fans that they're trying to appeal to. They're not trying to appeal to. There was rumors or reports going around that they were referring to kind of existing fans or older fans as legacy fans, that they weren't interested in appealing to these legacy fans because kind of they're already there, they're already secured almost. They need to focus on the next generation of fans, the future fans, the global fans. So, it didn't seem outside the realm of possibility to have a Manchester derby, Manchester United versus Manchester City, being held in Paris or in Spain or in New York, or which again, the thought of that angered a lot of fans and myself. Not that I'm one that actually attends many matches, but it still feels like, again, it's further removing the club from its roots and from, its local Manchester location, if you're talking about Manchester, to this more global approach. And I don't know exactly how it works with American sports. If you get a lot of traveling fans, or if franchises move around, fans are happy to travel long distances to a new city, or whether just the people in the new city will just pick up and be like, oh, okay, we have a new franchise in town, I guess I better support them. But that perhaps touches on another thing, is that a lot of fans don't change their allegiances in football, as the stadiums don't move or whatever, or a franchise isn't going to move to a different town. You support your boyhood club, or you, like myself, you pick a team when you're younger, and then most fans, obviously, we like to say a few flip-flop fans, or glory hunting fans, not to say that it doesn't happen, but most fans like to stick with their club and like to follow their club and be able to go to the home games. So if there are matches being held in different countries, that is another sense of that, turning their back on the home fans and their particular supporters groups for various clubs, or for Manchester United at least, that uh, attend every single game and are responsible for a lot of the chants and the singing that goes on within the stadium. There's a whole singing section at Old Trafford that's responsible for part of creating the atmosphere for that ground. And again, that's something that you can't necessarily have if you're moving everything to an international level. And
Yes, I can imagine the American owners being quite frustrated with that. Because if you look at like the NFL again, for example, like if you're the Green Bay Packers in Wisconsin on the basically on the Canadian border, and then you have to go and play the Miami Dolphins, well, you're going to the airport and you're flying 3,000 miles to play your game once a week, And it's like, America's so big, that's just what you do. And they have conferences set up so the teams should be closer together. But because the franchises move, they end up not being as close as that. Like, they're supposed to be in East Coast and West Coast, but then people started swapping and changing. So, but I can imagine, like, the American owners being like, yeah, well, stop your complaining, because, 1 week we're playing in the frozen tundra of Wisconsin, and then we're down in Jacksonville, North Florida, where it's, back home it was minus 20 degrees. Now it's plus 30 degrees, and we still have to go out there and play. And I can see, exactly as you're saying, like, the travelling fans is not such a big thing, again, because you're fans of the franchise more than fans of the team. And, like, if Manchester United, I think, is a not necessarily a great example, because everywhere that Manchester United go, they have fans. But if you pick, like, Spurs, for example, if Spurs go and play in Moscow, there's probably not that many Tottenham Hotspur fans popping out to Moscow, Russia, being like, oh, da, comrade, Tottenham Hotspur, da, da, da. No, but if United go, it's United.
That's an impeccable Russian accent, I must say.
Thank you. After 18 months of living in Moscow, that's what I picked up. Da, da, Tottenham Hotspur, da. So maybe they do have more fans there than I thought. But again, I can imagine those American owners just being like, I just don't understand what the problem is. Because again, one of the big criticisms levied against this idea was that it ruins competition, right? The thing that people like about football is you start off, my favourite team, as we well know, is Bath City, who are my boyhood team for my entire life. Local team, Bath City, they're they're non-league, which means what are the leagues in the UK? The Premier League, the Championship, the
League One,
1, 2, 3
Conference, I think.
Conference, yeah. And then underneath all of that, there's Bath City, right? They're not even a league. But you go there, there's like 1,000 people at every game at the maximum. But that's not the point. The point is you go there because they're your local team, and what you want to see is for them to move up from the non-league into the league. Can you imagine? And the amount of time that people spend playing football championship manager games, like we have done with all of our life, basically, is because you are trying to make that progress, right? You are trying to progress from the lower leagues to the higher leagues to win the Champions League. That's the apex of your football manager game, because it's an accomplishment. But the criticism leveled against the Super League is every team that has bought into the Super League doesn't have to compete. They are already there. They have secured their place simply by being rich enough to be there. And that's anti-competitive. It means the teams won't focus on the actual competitive leagues because they're going to get less money for stakes they don't really care about anymore. Like, why bother wasting all of your talented players on the Premier League to get into the Champions League, where you're earning more money in the Super League than you are in the other two combined? Like, what's the point of competition anymore? But if I'm the American owner, I say, well, actually, in the NBA, or let's take the NFL, we have our 32 teams. the point of the NFL isn't that somebody's going to go up and down. The point of it is to compete for that trophy at the end, right? It's going to be the same teams every year unless they move or they rebrand or whatever. But the point is the competition for that trophy at the end of the season. And everyone's fighting for the same trophy. And also, because there's only 32 teams, the owners have control, a certain amount of control, over the league itself. Like, the owners in the NFL are very important. But I think the owners in, like, UEFA, for example, like, UEFA doesn't give a shit what the owners thought. And that's why the owners have had to go and feel like they've had to go and do this thing themselves anyway, right? Because the owners were like, this is what we want to do. UEFA said, no, you have to do what we say you have to do. The owners were like, well, we'll go and make our own thing then. Right? We're American. We know how to do this because we do it very profitably on, in our own country. So we're just going to come and do it over here. And we, as football fans, are obsessed with the idea of competition on the pitch. But if it's like the competition of organizations, like, there is no other organization. If you don't like FIFA, well, you can't go outside of FIFA. If you don't like UEFA, you can't go outside of UEFA. Say you're Manchester United and you don't like the way that the Premier League is operating. What are you going to do? There's nothing you can do about it. And they are capitalists thriving on competition, stuck inside an organizational monopoly, and they've done what Americans do, and So what is it about actual competition that has you so, like, enraged over the Super League? Like, they're just doing what teams do all around the world. Why is it different, right? Why does it matter with these are the elite teams of Europe? Like, why can't they just do whatever they want?
Yeah, so the point of competition is very important, and as you said, and as we touched on earlier, the concept of promotion and relegation is bread and butter, like it's a core foundation of European football, which again might be something that is not so familiar to the American owners. And another thing that kind of riled a lot of fans, particularly in the UK, is the clubs that are involved in this. Whilst yes, you could say that they do have the largest reputations in European football, not all of them have been particularly successful as of late. A lot of them are teams that have had success 10 years ago that have maybe struggled more recently. I have a picture that actually you sent me earlier about league titles that some of the clubs that are involved in this league have won. So, like, Arsenal haven't won a league title since 2004. Manchester United haven't won a league title since 2013. Spurs have never won the Premier League. They won the old First Division in 1961. Inter Milan haven't won a league title in Italy since 2011. Oh, sorry, AC Milan. Inter Milan haven't won one since 2010. So, like, almost half of these clubs, and also Manchester United haven't won a Champions League in ages. Arsenal have never won a Champions League. Tottenham have never won a Champions League. Inter Milan, AC Milan haven't won Champions. Well, actually, Mourinho won one with Inter Milan. They've won one in like the last 10 or so years. So these aren't necessarily the best clubs in Europe at the moment. They are just historically the richest, or historically the most successful. And one of the key components of the current Champions League, the elite European competition, is that whilst it still has its own flaws, it's still somewhat based on merit. You still have to perform well in your domestic league to gain entry, which is why the likes of Tottenham, Arsenal, AC Milan, Inter Milan, have not been present in the Champions League for many of the previous seasons because they haven't been good enough. And a lot of people do see the Champions League is supposed to be a League of Champions, which even from its inception, it isn't. I think there are a lot of people that would like to even see the Champions League reduced to make it more of an elite competition. But instead it's being expanded probably to try and, satiate to some degree these larger clubs. But the fact that a lot of these teams, aren't very good at the moment. Arsenal are currently ninth in the league. I think Tottenham are currently seventh in the Premier League or something like that. Chelsea, Liverpool are fifth, or maybe sixth. They're as of their current league standings, only 2 out of the 6 English clubs would actually qualify for the Champions League next season. So guaranteeing these teams a place in a league gets rid of that sense of competition, that risk and reward for performing well. And not only that, the European Super League was also excluding a lot of other clubs from different nations that have very storied history in top European competitions. Clubs like Ajax and clubs like, Bayern Munich and PSG, who just flat out refused to take part altogether. But you've got clubs like Porto, who won the Champions League, Feyenoord, you've got like Celtic, Rangers, you have even clubs like Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest, who I think, many years ago won the competition. So I think Pep Guardiola came out today and was asking, as is a lot of fans have, like, why do Tottenham get included but Ajax don't, when Ajax have a far greater European history and have been far more successful in Europe over the years than what Tottenham have. So it is that further kind of example of just rich people buying themselves into an exclusive club, which again I think a lot of people saw as showing the true face of greed of a lot of these companies. What companies? Clubs. Well, no, it's not even the clubs, it's the owners of the clubs. Yeah, I need to make sure anytime that I mention that it's either Manchester United or Liverpool doing this, I think it's wrong to say that it's the club doing this, because largely it's not, because it came out today that most of the players, the managers, the staff at these clubs also had no idea that this was going to happen until late Sunday evening, just before the original announcement was made. So this has very much been a decision that's been driven by the very top owners of these clubs without the consent or advice or conversations with a lot of the people that they're supposed to represent, which again kind of rubbed people the wrong way. And another interesting point that might be worth touching on is the relation to COVID and the pandemic. And like, was it Florentino Perez came out and said basically that they're doing this because COVID has impacted, the finances in football and they want more money, basically. Come out, couldn't be more clearly, and said that, they're basically doing this because they need more money. And I think a lot of people have a bit of an issue with that relation to COVID in the way that they are kind of using this pandemic as a reason,
leverage.
as leverage. This horrible thing that's taken so many lives and that we're still trying to get over at the moment, trying to use that in a way as a pawn or as a catalyst to try to make more money for themselves as a result of it, which I think again is something else that doesn't sit well with a lot of people. Instead of trying to again help share the wealth out, help everyone recover from this, or help their local communities in these areas to help recover from this pandemic, it's like no, we need more money for ourselves and our clubs because our businesses aren't doing as well. And at the end of the day, we're businessmen and we're here to make money for our businesses. So, we need to do what's best for our business, which a business is business, but doesn't mean people like it.
Yeah, well, this is again where we come back into this era of Roman Abramovich and the billionaire owners taking over. Is the reason that the financial fair play rules came in, right? Once billionaires started buying the clubs, it was those clubs who have the richest owners buy the best players, who win the Champions League, who then earn the most money, who buy the best players to win the Champions League, to buy the best players to win. And then the problem you have with the Premier League now, as we were talking about at the beginning, even Leicester is owned by a billionaire, right? So at what point is football not this business? The only difference is that these businessmen have decided, you know what, fuck it. They kept us within these rules. We're the biggest clubs in the world, right? We're the biggest clubs in the world, and we have just lost, like Man United just lost £100 million of revenue compared to last year. We don't want to risk losing another £100 million because what the big clubs do is they use their expected revenue of, say, £600 million to spend £200 million to buy Neymar. So you're spending perhaps, a third of your total year revenue on a single person. And the staff costs at football clubs are so crazy. Again, American owners will suffer with this because American sports have salary caps. So in America, the NFL, for example, says you cannot spend more than X amount each team. So Manchester United could not spend more money than West Bromwich Albion. Are West Brom in the Premier League at this point?
Uh,
I feel like
yes.
they could be, but they might
He
not.
says frantically, yes, they're second from bottom.
Fantastic. Well, it would not be the case in the NFL necessarily, because in the NFL you cannot buy or sell players. You can only trade players because they have a draft system. You cannot buy or sell players. There is a salary cap, so each team can only pay the same amount of money distributed amongst their team. And then you come over to British football, to European football, to real football, and it's like your costs are so exponentially high. This is why Arsenal under Arsene Wenger didn't fucking buy anybody, because the owners took over the team and were like, wait, we have to do what to win? They're like, this isn't why we bought the team. We bought it to earn money, not to, and the teams operate at a loss based on the wealth and value of their owners, which is absolutely insane. And it's why, as we've spoken about ourselves, why moving to a German 51% fan-owned model, that stuff will still happen because rich people can still buy up the remaining 49%, driving up share prices, driving up the value of the club, giving the clubs more money. But that within a set rules of financial fair play, like, it's absolutely insane what clubs are able to get away with, and the only reason that the fans of these clubs are now upset about it is because it's like, oh yeah, but I can't travel to Juventus every week to watch a match. I know that's not really it. That's me being, flippant. But you know what I mean? Like, United fans always had a problem with the Glazers, right? But Chelsea fans, their relationship with Abramovich was like, well, as long as we can still buy players, like, what the fuck do we care, right? But why is this a who watches the World Cup issue, right? Where does the World Cup come into all of this? Because it's the Euros coming up. Like, this is a giant middle finger to UEFA, to FIFA. How do they respond? What does it have to do with the World Cup at all?
Yeah. Well, I just quickly want to say, as a point that you mentioned, it was rumoured or reported, I believe in the Telegraph earlier today, actually, before everything started to crumble apart, that supposedly there was going to be a salary cap in this new Super League, where it said only 55% of revenue on salaries, agents' fees, and transfers.
There you go. That's the Americans
Yep,
for you.
which a lot of fans instantly went to say, well, does that mean the other 45% is just going in the pockets of the owners? Is that just another way to secure even more money for, the businessmen that are running it? But to move on to the point you were making, that about its potential ramifications for the rest of Europe, as we mentioned, to go back over old ground very briefly, but as it was supposed to be a supplemental competition, the logistics of it made it impossible to be able to coexist with the existing European competitions and formats. So as such, it was kind of seen as a replacement to the
It was a coup.
yeah, a replacement to the existing Champions League, and kind of, a bit of a hostile takeover, so to speak, which obviously UEFA and FIFA, as being, like the controlling bodies of European and world football, and in control of, the Champions League, it looked like, if this went ahead, that it was basically going to cripple and destroy the Champions League, because there was concerns that, all the focus would be put where the money is, maybe justifiably, to this Super League. So all the teams would, they either they wouldn't be able to organise it, it wouldn't work logistically, or they wouldn't care about it because they would put out a second team because they would want to save the best players to play in the Super League matches. So as a way to try and combat this, one of the first things that was then rumoured and then was kind of confirmed by the heads of UEFA was that any players, I think it was on a player level, any players that were at one of these clubs that was involved in the Super League would be banned from European competitions, and also banned from international competitions, the European Cup and the World Cup as well. And then there was a lot of back and forth then between Florentino Perez, the head of this ESL, coming out and being very bullish and saying that no, they don't have a leg to stand on legally, basically. They can't ban players from, international tournaments, and we've already got legislation in place that protects us against them trying to ban players from, international competitions. But then you had, UEFA and FIFA saying, nope, anybody that takes place, we're going to ban them. So it looked like it was heading towards a potential dispute between this new organisation and the existing organisation of, if you want to be part of this new money Super League, then, well, up you, we're not going to let you take part in the World Cup, which essentially is a pretty big bargaining chip in the world of football, being one of the most popular sporting events in the world, and being most footballers' dream is to play in the World Cup. That's what really makes players legends and cements their history in the game, is how well do you perform in the World Cup. Did you win the World Cup? That's always the connection with Pele, and why Pele has always been regarded as one of the best players, is his connection and association with the World Cup and winning it and his performances in them. So to potentially ban players from the World Cup or ban players from the European competitions would have been huge, and unfortunately kind of very unfair on the players that are kind of stuck in the middle of this situation, that they didn't vote for this, they weren't involved in, the discussions of this, but now they've been thrown into this situation where potentially, they're being pulled from both sides. Do they follow the money with their club, or do they want to, represent their national team at the World Cup? So it looked like it was heading for a very messy kind of legal dispute potentially over, is this possible? Can they ban them? Can't they ban them? Are players going to make decisions? What decisions are players going to make? But luckily, well, yeah, fortunately, it seems like, as we mentioned earlier, with the seeming collapse of this league as we started recording, that that might not be a situation that we have to worry about any longer. But it would have been quite a unprecedented and historic kind of moment if, all of a sudden, because it's largely all the top teams, and so like a lot of the nation's best players would then, potentially not be able to represent their countries. I think we were speaking earlier.
It would have just guaranteed a World Cup final of France versus Germany, wouldn't it? Every single year, because like all the German players, not all of them, but the vast majority play at Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund, who like have both refused to join because they are 51% owned by the fans, and all football fans around the world are unanimously like, this is insane, so they're not going to join. And then Paris Saint-Germain, and this is the point I kind of want to get into with FIFA, is Paris Saint-Germain are owned by the Qataris, by a Qatari investment fund.
Yes, the
right?
Qatari investment fund, the sovereign wealth fund of Qatar, or however it's correctly said.
And they are also the hosts of the World Cup next year.
Yes.
So no German team is going to join this thing because football fans despise this concept. Paris Saint-Germain aren't going to join because they are financially invested in FIFA and the success of the World Cup. As a country, the country of Qatar cares about the country of Qatar more than it cares about the European Super League, right?
Yeah.
So they are the only team in the world who will not financially benefit from it. So they're not going to do it. So what makes FIFA any different to the ESL stuff? FIFA now have been touted as like, FIFA. Like, no football fan in the world likes FIFA other than the fact that it's on the front of your fucking PlayStation game, right? That's what people like about FIFA. What people hate about FIFA is that for every World Cup, they go into a country and they rape it. And I don't use that word lightly. I use that to mean that's literally what they do. Like, Brazil, for example, I was bringing this up to you. Brazil famously, because of historic football violence, which every country has, football's not perfect. Historic football violence in Brazil, there is no alcohol allowed to be consumed in Brazilian football stadiums. But, Steve, Budweiser is a sponsor of FIFA and the World Cup. And when the World Cup was held in Brazil, FIFA forced Brazil to change their legislation to allow alcohol consumption in the stadium so that Budweiser could be drank. FIFA are criminals, famously criminals. Sepp Blatter is probably the most infamous sports figure in football history for literally being corrupt. And what we have here is a bunch of corrupt billionaires fighting another group of corrupt billionaires for who can be the most corrupt. And what you said about the players, I think, was a really good point. You've got these players stuck in the middle. But FIFA are acting like the mafia. They're like, if you go and you join this European Super League, maybe you don't wake up tomorrow. Nice club you got here. Be a shame if something happened to it.
Yeah, it is amazing how kind of FIFA and UEFA have gone from like zero to hero, or from the the villains,
from the most despised, from villain to hero.
They've really had like quite a dramatic like character arc over the last 2 days. It's been quite remarkable because, as you said, FIFA are far from the P in perfect, let alone the other letters in it. Like, the corruption in FIFA has been ridiculous for decades, and it's just, I heard somebody else use the phrase, just finally a bigger bully has come along and been able to, well, almost outbully them, basically. And they, FIFA and UEFA do have a monopoly on. Well, they are the overriding controlling body
Yeah.
of European football, and the bidding process for World Cups is, well, probably an absolute sham. You know,
Well, as we all know why Qatar is holding the next World Cup, right? We all know it.
yeah,
We all know. Like Russia holding the level, we all know. We know why they're hosting it. And yet we've allowed this to continue. So when these group of... The only reason these guys can do it is because they're American. And the Americans don't care about football. Right? So because they don't care about it, they're like, FIFA, so what? Who cares? What, you're going to come all the way to Boston, to Fenway Park? You're going to bring your Italian FIFA mafia shit to Boston? I don't think so. If they were European, that you wouldn't be able to do it, I don't think. It's because they're owned by foreign owners that they can do it, right?
yeah, and I think it is a little bit of, as I think I mentioned to you, like boiling the water whilst the frog's in it, like as this kind
that's a
of
great metaphor.
corruption with UEFA is just kind of been in the background and escalated slowly throughout the years. It's kind of everybody has kind of got a little bit accustomed to it, and it's like
It's two frogs in two pots of boiling water. In one pot, you've got FIFA, UEFA, and their rampant corruption. And in the other pot, you've got billionaires slowly buying European football. And then both of these frogs have realised, well, maybe they're about to jump and they've hit each other. They've leapt out of their pot. Or they're boiling together, and this is,
yeah.
this is the frog soup at the end of it.
Yeah, so I think it's that slow kind of gradual, descent into corruption that UEFA's had. It's kind of everybody, I think, has just been a little bit like, that's the status quo, so we know it's bad, but we don't think we can do anything about it. And as it's kind of built up over time, I think it's kind of been able to stay in the shadows a little bit more, whereas maybe stereotypically in a true American fashion, this Super League is just kind of like come out of the gates at 1,000 miles an hour, making all the noise and like being very bold and making its presence known straight away, and not trying to perhaps hide its intentions and try and be like UEFA or FIFA and be like, oh no, there's no corruption here, don't look at us. Like, the Glazers and Florentino Perez have just been like, boom, in your face. Here we come with, we want money, like, in a way, like, fair play for them for being upfront about what they want.
Well, at least they're honest.
But I think it's that initial shock of the boldness of it that has
the arrogance.
the arrogance and the boldness of it, which is what's offended people so vehemently, so quickly, that on the other hand, the opposite approach of FIFA is perhaps what has allowed them to get away with it for so long. But another negative of FIFA that I've seen being spoken about a lot is that as soon as this was announced, all of a sudden FIFA was very quick to be like, okay, we're going to ban them, we're going to kick them out. Action was very fast. But on topics of racism, inequality, they're very slow. We've had kick it out campaigns, and it seems to have taken a lot of effort to try and promote this kind of action and response. But when something is come basically for their throat and now their lives are in danger,
their bottom line,
all of a sudden they found the ability to act very fast and make statements very quickly and produce action very fast, which as I said, whilst UEFA is still kind of looking like heroes a little bit, that is a conversation that I've heard also being raised as part of this same conversation, as people are well aware that it's kind of picking your poison, or maybe it's better the devil you know kind of kind of thing. Like, we know it's not perfect, but we know what we're getting with this situation, whereas with you, we don't know what we're getting, and we don't like the sound of and also nobody likes change. So
Yeah.
yeah,
There's a great Lois Black sketch. He's an American comedian, and he's talking about the Iraq War. And he said, "What the real fuck up that the Bush government made with the Iraq War was that they didn't spend more time trying to convince everyone to hate the Iraqis." He said, I don't care if the war is right or if the war is wrong. You're supposed to put the wool over my eyes and convince me that they're the bad guys. So when we go to war, I'm like, hoorah, America. But instead, you didn't even bother. You just invaded it, and now we're all pissed off at you. And I feel that this is that similar kind of thing, where it's like, they could have started with because of COVID and everything that's been lost this year, we're going to do a 2021-22 European Super League for a season, just to raise funds for all the teams that suffered because of COVID. We're going to do it for one season. We, as these top 20 teams, the richest teams in the world, we're not going to take any money from it. What we're going to do is we're going to do it for one season, and then all of the money is going to go to the lower league teams that suffered because of COVID. Then 2022-23, you go, we're back for the Super League, bitches, and this time the money's all ours. And people would probably have been on board because they saw it one year and they supported it because they knew where the money was going. But instead, it was like, you know what? Oh, we need money. We lost money. We regularly operate on a loss, but we operate on a profitable loss, if that makes sense. But what's happened this year is we've operated on a loss, then we've lost an extra 100 million because of COVID, so now we're actually operating on a loss, so we need to do something about it. And it's like no one in the world of football is thinking, I feel really sorry for the Glazers, actually, that they lost money on Manchester United this year. Like, it's a real shame because, I'm just a real fan of the organisation. Like, nobody's thinking that in the world. No one has their backs because they've screwed fans for so long.
Dom, I've always been a big advocate of foreplay. And I feel that is what is missing here. We needed 12 months of foreplay, right? Both pro-Super League and anti-FIFA. Because it's there on a plate for you, right? Like, you want to disrespect FIFA, you've got, like, an entire... Well, I could make a very rude reference, but treasure trove of, like, potential ammunition that you could be.
Did you know they're using illegal labour to build the Qatari stadiums for the World Cup in 2022? Like, people are literally dying building those stadiums, and FIFA are allowing this to happen. You should be against FIFA and be towards us, the owners who are going to do things for you, the fans. We're going to give you the games you want.
Exactly. Do 12 months of, like, buttering me up, like, sext me for a little bit first, then
Send some nudes.
Yeah. Invite me on a few dates, and then serenade me, make me aware of what's happening, prepare me for this experience. Don't just,
Don't fist me straight off.
Well, yeah, I was trying to think of a more elegant way to say it, but that's what I wanted to say. Yeah, and that's what they've done with the Super League. It's like, bam, here is an incredibly large implement, whereas, you just needed a little bit of love for 6 months, and I think they could have convinced a lot of people, just go on like a 6-month charm offensive, then a 6-month anti-FIFA offensive, and, I'm sure that you could have wooed a lot of people, or at least softened the blow, but no, they, as I kind of mentioned earlier, they came at it like a bull out of a china shop. No one was expecting this announcement. There wasn't even, that I saw, any like rumored murmurings that you're like, oh, this might happen. It was all of a sudden at like 9 o'clock. It was like, oh, something might happen.
America
Something might
time.
happen.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden at like midnight, in the UK time, all of the clubs suddenly released this same copy and paste statement, which kind of, blindsided absolutely everyone. So it's like, as you like made reference to with the war quote, it's like if they'd marketed it better or just like prepared everybody for it, got people on board first, then I think, even just tell the bloody players and the managers, like, get some support so you're not perceived as doing this so on your own. Then, I think they would have had a much easier job actually trying to get this whole scenario over the line. But should we talk about what is actually happening with it right now? Or is there anything you want to bring up?
I say by the time we talk about what's happening now and this is released, things will have changed. Like, as you said, like, things have changed just over the hour or so that we've been talking. Like, we started, Man City have just withdrawn. Chelsea are currently playing.
Yes.
So they're not going to withdraw. They might withdraw after
Well,
the match.
I think it was announced before. I don't know if an official statement came out, but there was certainly strong hints
They're preparing.
before the match that was suggested that they are going to pull out. I think I saw apparently Roman Abramovich was calling a meeting tonight or something, and there are also reports that Arsenal are going to pull out, and it seems like so at the moment BBC are just reporting that Man City have withdrawn from the European Super League, Chelsea set to follow. So it looked
Doesn't this just feel like the perfect thing to happen to football for like the Brexit COVID era? Right? Isn't this like this is essentially Brexit but for football teams?
yeah.
And then you've got the rest of the world being like, "What are you doing? Are you insane?" And they're like, we're going to be all right on our own." And then actually it turns out they're not going to be all right on their own. But also it's like the COVID thing, it just fits in there with that, and it's so perfect for bringing back Who Watches the World Cup, because it's billionaires using their money and their influence to overwhelm and overpower the interests of the working class, and internationally as well. Which brings me on to the final thing I want to discuss, which is FIFA are corrupt. Some good hand gestures you got going.
Thumbs down for FIFA.
This audio medium. Yeah, thumbs down for FIFA. Thumbs down for the European Super League. We can't just let things continue as they are, right? The problem isn't that these billionaires have decided that they're going to jerk off into everyone's faces. The fact is, we knelt down for them in the first place, right? So what are the changes that we can make to save football? Because at the moment it's already lost. As you said before, the reason the fans are upset is because they've just realised what they've lost. So what do you change, right? What do you reform to get football back?
Yeah. Well, hopefully this is going to act as the wake-up call that football in this country needed, that again has been slowly, maybe again to borrow the same frog in the boiling water analogy, that's been happening to the league over the past 15 to 20 years. I don't know exactly when Roman Abramovich did buy Chelsea. I think it maybe was early 2000s or something. That in a way they made a rod for their own backs in the sense that they allowed the commercialization, the I was going to say the businessification of these football clubs to happen by allowing these foreign investors, and it's kind of rumbled along, somewhat maintaining a status quo. You have a new club be bought, they become successful, and then a few years later another club gets bought and they become successful, and they try and ease the fans by trying to do various like local schemes and try to show that they do care for the local community. But I think, well, hopefully, this is going to be the wake up call that their intentions aren't pure, and no matter how many or how many millions they spend on buying new players, the end of the day, like you said, it's still trying to run it as a business to make profit. So this might be the time, or hopefully can be, the catalyst for some actual change. Now, I believe in Parliament earlier today there was talks of some sort of independent review into football finance, or
They've got a bloody independent review for everything.
yeah,
But at least that's some form of action. Like, would you support like a Bundesliga style model? Where, like, because that's what I said earlier
yeah,
on about Bath City, my local team, of course, just to brag about them for a second while I have the chance. They are 54% owned by the fans, Bath City. And you can, if you would be interested, you can join for £5 a year. Would you support that sort of thing for the Premier League as well? Like fan ownership of the teams?
I think that's the most obvious, model to use as an example, and I believe that that it is a model that they're supposedly exploring in this review. I was trying to frantically see if I could find a news article about it, but I was struggling to try and find the article. But yeah, I think that is a good model because it still gives the opportunity for rich people to invest in the club, to in an attempt to make them more successful, and potentially through being successful. I'm no business expert, but I would assume they would still be able to make money out of 49%, or they would still be able to take dividends from the shares that they own, and better performance on the pitch, more consistent qualification to the top competitions, winning the top competitions, more prize money, only brings more money into the club to allow you to make money off of it, and but retaining some sort of fan input keeps the clubs as a more local entity. It gives fans that connection to the club back, that sense of involvement, that sense of almost harking back to the original founding socialist kind of working class men's clubs that everybody still tries to hold dear, but as we've said, has kind of definitely eroded, over time to the point where they think it's there. But as we've seen, in the last few days, ultimately it's not. So I think I think it's a very good example that, could be followed to allow more control, and better regulation, if nothing else, over, over what happens with the clubs. And at least if something like this, if fans vote for something like this, then, at least, what, 51% of 51% people would have wanted it to happen. So, I think it's definitely would be a step in the right direction. I think even within that German model, I think it's not necessarily perfect, or I know that kind of the RB Leipzig, the way that their club is run or owned, I think kind of stretches the boundaries of that system a little bit. So I don't think it's necessarily a perfect system, but it's definitely more secure than what we have at the moment, and it's the reason why, the German clubs, Borussia Dortmund, Bayern Munich, RB Leipzig, aren't involved or weren't involved in the creation of this, Super League, or weren't part of the founding clubs of this Super League, because it wasn't allowed to happen, and
And it's not as if it's hurt their success either. Bayern Munich just won the Champions League.
yeah,
They're the top team in Europe, the reigning team in Europe.
yeah,
Right?
and they've
So
won the
it's
Bundesliga
not
for
as
like
if
the last, how God knows how many, I think like 8-9 years in a row now as well.
see, yeah. See, that may be a criticism of that kind of ownership, is that once a team is dominating and on top, there's no chance for like a Leicester, for example, where an outside billionaire comes in and just helps you win the league in like 4 or 5 seasons.
Yeah.
But I guess it doesn't overtake fan ownership. It's just that the fans continue to own more. The value of the club goes up. So the fans own more, even if the outside investment is. So it still potentially works, but
But the same thing of what you were saying there, that that works both ways. Whilst the billionaire can't necessarily come in and rocket somebody from the top, it also means that a club that decides to get their house in order and, quote, do things the right way and employs good people, and they can progress up and not be instantly overtaken by a mega rich person, like a Roman Abramovich coming in and all of a sudden propelling Chelsea to the top of the Premier League, or all of a sudden propelling Man City to the top of the Premier League, and that's why I say that the situation with RB Leipzig, I think, is a little bit similar to that, because I think they have rose very quickly through the German footballing ranks, through or partly through their investment. So it still can happen, but I think it is generally overall a fairer model than what we have at the moment, which is just like a completely free and open market where there basically is absolutely no rules or regulations or controls in place to try and keep some sort of control over what happens in the league. So, because I don't know, where does it end up going? Is every club going to end up being bought by billionaire owners to the point where everybody's got one? So like nothing's I don't know, how does it even continue on in that regard? I don't know, but I think for the longevity of the league and the safety of the league, to stop owners making unilateral decisions without even consulting the rest of the clubs at any level, I think there needs to be something in place to try and mitigate that, or stop that, or give some sort of greater control back to, I don't know, the club in whatever shape or form, whether it be through fan-owned shares or some sort of, I don't know, trust organization, or like, I don't know, charitable organization that owns the club or something.
So much of this ties into the other podcasts that we've done, whether it be Daddy Issues or whatever it is that we do, where you have, I'm going to use Star Wars as an example, but Marvel also works as an example, where you have a long, dedicated fan base to a particular thing, whether it be your football club, whether it be Star Wars, whether it be comic books. And these long, dedicated fans have stayed there from the very beginning, when it was a working class medium, when your comic books cost 10 cents from a newspaper stand. Then they started making more money out of it. And then Manchester United won the treble, or Star Wars became the biggest, the most famous film franchise, or the MCU started and the value of Marvel went from Marvel essentially being bankrupt to being worth billions. And then a bigger corporation came in, a billionaire corporation came in and said, we can use the human investment in this IP, essentially, in this property, and we are going to profit off of these people's human investment, whether it be going every Saturday to watch your local team, or whether it be you buying your copy of Spider-Man every week, like every Saturday for the last the last 20 years. And then they go, actually, the version of Spider-Man that you've read for the last 20 years, that's not going to sell well in the market today because the market's different and we want to go for a different audience. So even though it is because of you that this is worth something, we don't actually care about your investment, your previous investment up to this point. And Star Wars is a great example because it sold for $1 billion from George Lucas to Disney, for $1 billion. And then Disney went, the Star Wars fans, we don't care about pleasing the Star Wars fans. We care about the next generation of Star Wars fans. But the reason that it was worth buying was because of the people who had invested in it before. And they had no interest in that. And with sport, it's the same thing. We don't have interest in the fans of Manchester United that are from Manchester, because there's only, 500,000 people in Manchester? In the foreign market, there's literally billions of them. So there's not even a comparison, right? The number of people who can buy shirts in Manchester is fewer than the number of people who will buy shirts in any other country in the world. So why do you even care about the people who made it into a profitable enterprise? Because they're not the next generation of fans. We're not looking to market to the children of Manchester. We're looking to market to the children of Delhi, to the children of Shanghai, to the children of Nigeria as that starts to develop. They're the future fans. They're what's profitable about it. And if that is what you want to do, right? Which you're a business, you want to make money, that you're a business. If that is what you want to do, then the fucking people of Manchester have to be involved in that and they have to profit from it. The people of Manchester have to profit from the fact that their shirts are selling in Beijing or in Africa or in India. The people of Manchester who built that club into what it is, the working class who turned it from... What was it called originally? It wasn't called Manchester United.
Newton Heath.
Newton Heath. The working class people who turned it from Newton Heath into the most valuable fucking club in sports history. They are the ones who deserve the dividends from that. Not some fucking Tampa Bay Buccaneers motherfuckers.
Amen, sister. But yeah, and I think that's something that they've underestimated in this creation of the new league, is underestimating the ferocity and the feverish nature of all the fans, because whereas, like you said, maybe for Star Wars fans or for Marvel fans, there's maybe not somewhere for them all to congregate and voice their opinions, except maybe a Comic-Con that happens, once a year or something. Whereas football happens every week, and there's a stadium where everybody goes, and everybody knows where to go. So if you, and especially if you're a large club like Manchester United, which has a 75,000 seater stadium, there's a place for 75,000 angry people to go to make a lot of noise.
There's a reason football violence was such a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And it's spoke about the as you mentioned with comic books and movies, the concept of fan power and fan ownership taking over creative decisions or the directions of these properties.
Some Snyder Cut bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, football is like the originator of this in a way.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you think Marvel fans are bad, like you piss off a group of football fans, and like it's
They will smash your head in.
Yeah, exactly.
The Snyder Cut fans were dicks on Twitter, but like football fans, you're dealing with a different breed.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like there's a level of feverish support that is almost perhaps
it's identity based. It's all identity based. Yeah, and that's what the Americans can't
unmatched in so many other things. So many people's identity or childhood memories and family memories are so connected to these specific clubs that you played growing up as a kid, or playing football with your favourite player's name on the back of your jersey and everything. Like, there is support of the next level that's probably not seen in many other sports or other industries, and trying to take something away, or the perceived stealing of a club from its fans is well, we've seen in the last few days what that effect is, and how powerful, and not only fans but also players for the clubs, because they understand it for the same reasons, because they play for these teams. There's no draft. It's not like somebody randomly gets put in a different team that they never expected to play for. It's a lot of footballers in this league grew up supporting either the club that they played for or another club in the league, or they're fortunate enough to play for the club that they supported, or they've come up through the youth ranks within that club. They have just as much passion for the club that they're in as everybody else. So again, like I said, it must have been pretty hard for the players as well to not know anything beforehand as well. But I think again that was a big they underestimated like the fans' connections with these clubs, which is again possibly just goes further to back up fans' theories and thoughts that these owners don't care, and they don't understand the clubs, which is just further been very clearly shown in what's unfolded with the attempted creation of this Super League, and how these clubs now are going to try and repair their image in the aftermath of this is also going to be very interesting. Like, well, as I was dancing around the room earlier at Ed Woodward resigning, is that the first casualty of this? Has it finally, have they finally taken a step too far now, and they finally, the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. I don't think it's going to make all the owners leave, but they might have to appoint new people to represent them, because the current people that were representing the tops of these clubs have now taken a leap of faith, and nobody's caught them on the other end. So they're going to be even more unpopular than they were previously. They've gone over the point of no return, really. So I don't know how they're going to attempt to come back from this, and it's now going to be a charm offensive to they're going to be there with a box of chocolates and a rose to try and apologise, and try to do whatever they can to try and make amends after this Super League debacle.
Yeah. So, the answer is fan ownership.
Indeed.
We've decided. Fuck the billionaires. Fuck the corrupt officials that caused this essentially to happen in the first place. Fan ownership to get people more control over the football that they love and that they grew up with. And also because, maybe actually if the fans are in charge, racism will kind of will be hurt as well, because the fans are accountable. You know when it's like fans are like, oh, your fans did some racist stuff, and the owners are like, yes, so? If your fans own the club and some of the fans do racist stuff, then the team hurts because the fans own the team. And also, fans who own the team don't want their players to suffer racist abuse because they own the team and they're invested in the players, right? So,
Yeah.
like, things like it's not a clear step, but like issues like racism that these organizations don't fucking care about, and that the owners don't fucking care about because they are not the people suffering from it.
Yeah.
Like, these are things that fans do care about, and fans do want to
Fans
change.
can
And yes, the fans
they
are.
can drive the issues forward,
Yeah.
yeah, with more power and
Yes.
authority if it's, if they
Yeah.
feel that it's an issue that is,
And the players can take it straight to the fans as well because the fans own the club.
yeah,
And if the players are like, this shit has to stop. If you're a black player for Newcastle and the Newcastle fans say something racist to a player on a different team, then you take it straight to your organisation and go, our people are being racist to another team. That doesn't stand.
yeah,
And then the fans are responsible for it. Whereas at the moment there's a disconnect. No more disconnect, Steve. Bring it
exactly.
together.
And potentially one last thing, as you were talking about, just conclusions. Hopefully, again, it can shed a spotlight on the failings of FIFA. Because at the end of the day,
Yes.
this has all come about, okay, from the greed of other people, but also kind of we can't forget that FIFA aren't the heroes in this, despite
Yeah.
coming out with some spicy words against some greedy billionaires. Hopefully, we can still remind ourselves that actually FIFA still have a lot of explaining to do themselves, and whilst we may have been able to chase off this new bully, we still
Yeah.
need to take a good long look at the bully that we already have at the moment. We can't just completely, like, we can't necessarily go back to just the status quo of how the ownership is at the moment. We also can't, continue to sit in our boiling water and allow FIFA to do whatever they want with the World Cups and the corruption that has been ingrained in that organisation for decades as well.
Final optimistic thought, because we've railed against the system for so long, and who watches the World Cup? Fundamentally, as much as it's about politics, we also care about football. Who's going to win the Euros this year? What's your prediction? Based on the fact that a lot of the players might not be able to go there right now, we don't know how it's going to play out, and we at least
San
know that
Marino.
Man City's players will be able to go. San Marino. I did pitch Andorra until I realised that all of the Germans would still be at Bayern Munich and therefore not involved. But what's your guess? Okay, give me a guess if the ESL stays, if this European Super League stays, who do you think will win? And if it's scrapped completely and open field, same as it was a week ago, what would your prediction
If it
be?
goes France, no, if it stays France, because none of the
Okay.
well, actually, no, that's a stupid answer. If it stays France, because PSG aren't in it, and there's a few. I don't know, Dom. I don't know.
I'm going to say if it stays Germany.
Yeah,
I
more
reckon.
German players stay in Germany.
Because
Yeah,
you're saying... Yeah, yeah. Whereas like Arsenal has always historically been like 95%
Yeah.
French players.
yeah. If it stays, yeah, probably Germany. As you were saying, because more German players stay in the German league than go elsewhere.
Yeah.
If it's abolished and back to normal free for all land,
Free for all, yeah.
a bit of an outside choice, Portugal.
Oh,
Portugal
that is
have a
an
very
outside choice.
good squad at the moment, I feel.
I thought they'd aged.
They've got a
aged
very
out at
good
this
younger crop coming through. Yeah, they've got an aging Cristiano Ronaldo who will still play until he's like 49. But
point. Yes.
there is a lot of other very good Portuguese players playing in the Premier League that are doing very well and that are very good players, as he frantically Googles to find out what the current squad is. So you've got Ruben Dias, who's probably the best centre-back in the Premier League this season.
Where does he play?
Man City. João Cancelo, who's a right-back who is very good, also at Man City. You've got Bruno Fernandes, who's one of the best players in the league this season and the best player Man United have had in ages. Bernardo Silva, also very good, playing in the midfield for Man City. You've got Ruben Neves at Wolves, who's very good. You've got João Moutinho, who's older but is still pretty good. You've got Ronaldo, you've got Diego Jota, who went from Wolves to Liverpool not long ago, who's playing very well. You've got João Felix, who's at Atletico Madrid, who was they paid like 114 million for him or whatever, like some wonder kid.
Billionaires!
Yeah, and they're all kind of in their mid-20s. João Felix is 21, Jota is 24, Ruben Neves is 24, Bruno Fernandes is 26, Bernardo Silva is 26, Cancelo is 26, Ruben Dias is 23. They have a lot of very good kind of players that are entering their prime. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know which country I'm going to choose, of course.
Andorra.
Yeah. Other than Andorra, if these teams, if the European Super Cup fails, Belgium.
I was going to say you're going to go for Belgium.
It's got. You know how I feel about Belgian football, Steve.
They've been underperforming for years. They should have won it. Yes.
Yeah. This is their time. I'm Belgian all the way.
Thorgan Hazard, man of the tournament.
The greatest of all Hazards, Thorgan Hazard.
Hands down, factually proven by me, with no evidence, that Thorgan Hazard is
the superior Hazard.
Has been for a decade. I don't care what Eden did at Chelsea. He's now at Real Madrid, and he is useless.
and he's in the Super League, so fuck him. Thorgan Hazard, all the way. Thank you for joining us again for Who Watches the World Cup. In the run-up to some future episodes, hopefully we'll cover some stuff about the Euros. If anything else really crazy and interesting happens with the cross-section of politics and football, we'll be back. But in the build-up to the most politically divisive World Cup in human history, other than maybe the time it was in Nazi Germany. Was there a World Cup in Nazi? There's definitely an Olympics. I don't know if there's a World Cup, but you can only imagine how crazy it would have been if there was. Qatar 2022. It's going to be real something, and we're going to be here in the build-up. So we're going to re-release the episodes from the previous World Cup so you can catch up on the kind of banter that we generally kind of have, the themes, what we talk about, and then how will things have changed from the previous World Cup to this one. There's only one way to find out. Subscribe, download, listen. I don't know, send it to your dad. He might be interested. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of Who Watches the World Cup, the podcast where we talk about the intersection of football and politics. We recorded this episode the day after the Super League was announced. It was announced on the 19th. We recorded on the 20th. At the beginning of the episode, Man City had said, "Oh, we're pulling out." By the time we had finished recording, all of the English clubs had pulled out. Now, today, it's the 21st, so just 2 days later, and the chairman of Juventus has said, this European Super League, it's done. It's done. Maybe you people in the wild future will have a different perspective on it, but it seems like for the moment, maybe the fans actually managed to win this one. And what will be really interesting to see is whether or not the fans can continue this movement and say, it's not just this that was the problem, it's everything that led up to this. So we'll see if any reform really does come about. Fingers crossed that it does. This is our first episode of Who Watches the World Cup since the 2018 World Cup, and now we will be building up to what is probably the most politically divisive World Cup since that time it was hosted in the country that tried to undermine the democracy of most of the entrants. No, that was the last World Cup. Okay, this one is going to be the next most politically divisive World Cup in Qatar 2022. So, subscribe, download everything for Who Watches the World Cup, because we're going to re-upload those old episodes. So when it comes to the 2022 World Cup, you can see where we were in 2018, where we've gone to now. There was no pandemic in 2018. So how will the face of politics have changed leading up to Qatar? Thank you again for listening. Stick around to listen to more Who Watches the World Cup, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, what you're saying, it makes me, Dom, I've always been a big, oh, god damn it!
Don't worry, this is what editing is for.
Cut.
This is what editing is for.
Edit this out, man. I've been thinking of this line for the last 15 minutes.
I am so excited for this now.